First, I'd like to start out. I started out with a number last time. This time, it's $2 to $3 a day. Now, if you can imagine that, living off of that every day, not just for food, but for housing and all that stuff. And so that is actually what Steve Prefontaine, who ran at the University of Oregon, made each day for running for the AAU, which nowadays NCAA athletes are not allowed to be paid. But back in the day, they used to be able to. The $2 to $3 a day was guaranteed through the AAU, and they were able to barely survive off that money. And that's actually where he lived. He lived in a trailer for most of his college career. He had a house in Coos Bay, Oregon, but at the university he was barely living off of scraps. He was living off of food stamps, and he also was an Olympian. So when you think Olympian, you don't think someone who's living off of food stamps and just barely getting by. So the AAU was really trying to stick it to all these athletes and make money off of them, because they'd send them to these meets and they'd go there, they'd get $2 to $3 a day, and all these executives would stay in these nice hotels and such, and they'd be getting by just fine. Now, the prospect of today is a coach like Bob Stoops at the University of Oklahoma. He makes about $5.2 million a year. That's without any signing bonus, that's without any of his executive bonuses that he gets from going to bowl games, etc. Now, he makes about $25,000 every 2 days, yet he'll go out and bash the critics for saying that NCAA athletes should be paid. So it's $30,000 a year, and that is through the oklahoma.edu website to attend Oklahoma. So $30,000 a year, yet he makes that in almost 2 days, 2.5 days. Yet he'll go out and call out his athletes for asking for money. Now, granted, some of them are on full ride. They get their academics obviously fully paid for. They get the best training. They get the best tutoring. But not everybody is a full scholarship athlete. People like me, who are a walk-on, we receive no money just off of the academics that we receive. Now, luckily, my studies have brought me enough money to come here. But other kids just walk straight onto the team, and they get nothing more than just their trainers, which most of these kids are not going to go pro, so they just get their trainers. They do get academic help, but they're not making any money throughout that full time because they're still paying their tuition. And they also, if you're a full-time walk-on, it doesn't matter if you're a walk-on or you're a scholarship athlete, you have zero time to work. Now, for me, fortunately, last year, I had to actually go to the casino to make my money. I had no time being on roster. Fortunately, I won, and that brought in my income for last year, enough to actually pay the rest of my tuition, pay my housing, and for food. So I got by just fine doing that, but it was a risk that I was willing to take. But other kids obviously are not going to be willing to take that risk. And for them, the only thing that they can do is possibly get a job, try to cram that in, which this is what I've done this semester. I wouldn't say fortunately I was sick, but I had mono earlier in the year, and I didn't make the track roster, so I had the opportunity to go into a good job, make about $10 an hour, and what I saw was the problem was that any athlete in the NCAA really doesn't have an opportunity to make money. So if you're a walk-on coming out of college, you may have debts just like everybody else. You don't have money, you didn't have time to work. So really you're behind the 8 ball in essence, behind everybody else. Granted, you do have that education that some people do not have. But for my proposition is that athletes should be paid. Now, I'm not saying that they should be paid a mass amount. My proposition actually is to pay them minimum wage for a part-time job, so 20 hours a week, $765, $760. That's going to bring in for them about $624 a month, which isn't even enough to pay for an apartment and food. But if you put that together, if you pay $624 a month to each player on an 80-man roster, which comes from the Oklahoma Athletic website, so an 80-man roster, $624 a month, that's going to net a total of about $500,000. Now, Bob Stoops making this $5.25 million. All you have to do is take that $500,000 from his salary, and he's still making over $4.5 million. So really, in essence, it's not a bad trade-off. Any coach in the NCAA makes more than $1 million, at least on the D1 level in football. So for them to come out and put their players on blast is not the right thing to do. And one thing that Tom Ferry, an ESPN analyst, said was that legally the players can pursue TV rights agreement money. So the NCAA makes all this money off of the NCAA tournament, the NCAA championship for football, and now they're going to make more money off of this upcoming bracket that they're going to have for NCAA football. So these kids can actually go out, they can get a lawyer, they can demand money, and under the legal system, they're allowed to get that money. And Mark Koba, a CNBC sports analyst, says that $2 billion is made in TV revenue every year for the NCAA, while the merchandise racks up $4.6 million. So every time those kids go out on the court, the track, the field, they're representing their school, they're representing the NCAA, and they're doing this, some of them for free, some of them are getting their tuition paid for. But the kids that do it for free are representing the school that is reaping all the benefits. They're representing the NCAA that's reaping all the benefits. And they're just kind of brushed under the table. So when they graduate, they have nothing to really show for it, obviously, unless you go pro. And the problem with that is that you have kids like Kevin Ware. I don't know if you guys saw that in the NCAA tournament. Louisville kid snapped his tibia in half. Now he's had a rod in his leg, which, who knows, maybe he comes back and makes the NBA, but if he doesn't, all that was for naught. He missed out on 4 years of working, couldn't have made money, and now he has nothing to show for it. So, in essence, the proposition of paying athletes really isn't that big of a deal if you can put a minimum amount, which not even a full-time job is not asking too much, but just taking money out of the coaches' salaries and hopefully putting that into their education and their working time. That way you can foresee a future for these kids as they get out of college. But overall, just give it a thought. Just kind of think about these NCAA athletes. I mean, you don't necessarily have to think about me. I'm getting along just fine, but there are some kids that are definitely worse off. But yeah, so just give it a thought and let me know what you think.